Volker, it's just wonderful to have some time with you. I
Same
haven't.
here, Robert.
Oh, I appreciate it. I want to introduce you, but also it's just fun to see you because I know the last time we were together was
Hmm.
at the premiere of this incredible film Conclave uh,
Hmm.
in Toronto, which we're going to talk about. But I had a feeling that screening, as we walked up the aisle, I may have said to you, "Get your tuxedo out and get your
Hmm.
speech prepared,"
Yes.
because we're going to talk about that score. But first, I'm going to brag about you for a moment. So you have to sit quietly while I describe your amazing moments, and certainly in the last few years.
Hmm.
Of course, we're here today because of Conclave, which is the second film you've done with Edward Berger, and you are now nominated for a Best Score for the Academy Award. For you've been nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Original Score, a Critics' Choice, a BAFTA, all for the Conclave. And this is the second time for you in the last 2 years because in 2023 you won the Academy Award in the Best
Hmm.
Score category for your work with Edward Berger on All Quiet on the Western Front. Uh,
Hmm.
you're right now also, just in your free time, you're working on Dune Prophecy, the prequel, the
Hmm.
series Day of the Jackal, and the documentary Hollywood Gate, which I'd like to know a little more about. You're an acclaimed pianist, composer, and I like in your bio it says you're an experimental musician,
Hmm.
which I really love. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I first want to just ask about Conclave because, of course, I've now seen the film twice. Once with you, and then I went again. In some ways, because not only do I love that film, but I'm really amazed by the score, Volker. I'm amazed
Hmm.
because there's no part of this score that is predictable. In fact, when I
Hmm.
listen to the score, it almost sounds like it could be the soundtrack to a horror film or maybe
Hmm.
a thriller. And I first want to know why that harmonic palette. Was that your idea? Was it the director's idea to make it kind of, I mean, even that kind of sliding second happening throughout the score is like
Hmm.
somebody's going to appear out of a shadow with a knife and kill the hero. I mean, it's so scary.
Hmm.
Why is that the aesthetic of the score?
Well, I mean, I have no answer in the beginning. I mean, when I'm starting a film, I'm mostly uncertain about what I'm doing in the first place. And I love actually that moment of uncertainty and risk and questioning, what could be the next music for it
Mm,
and what could be an instrument. I always feel it is a very raw and fragile moment when you are standing in front of, in a way, what maybe earlier composers described as an empty page. I think that is a moment where you still have the freedom to do decisions in terms of, what do I want to do? Do I want to make pace? Do I want to be slow? Do I want to be dark? And so to get more certainty into that question, I have to find out by experimenting and finding instruments that I love. Maybe that are I try to find metaphors in the story or in the in the arc of the story where I feel like I don't like really much to write themes for for certain roles in the film or for certain actors. I rather try to find music that has a much more philosophical sense that, you know, maybe talks about the loss of youth, or that talks about the innocence, that talks about finding a religion, that talks about uncertainty, things like that. I rather like these kind of words. And then I'm looking into, you know, finding music and instruments that could work with that in that frame. And the first thing with Conclave was the search for an instrument that represents maybe an idealistic religious space, like which is the Vatican as a location, in, you know, idealistic in a way. It was made for maybe be in the castle of, you know, the possibility of reaching God maybe at some point. But as we know, practically things are looking differently than the idealistic state of mind. So, but I wanted to find something that in a way is like a very, you know, representing this kind of eeriness, this like a spiritual space in a way. And so that was my first idea for the first palette, and I looked into an instrument that might be able to replace the choir or an organ, so I'm not using those. And so I looked into glass instruments, you know, and I found the crystal bachet, which is a French instrument that I really loved, as because it didn't sound like a glass harp, but it had this kind of distorted metal sound at the end, because you have resonators that are, you know, starting to resonate and distort. So it sounded much more like a synthesizer. I loved that quality, and I recorded that. At the same time, there was the Thriller, and Edward looked into into thrillers from the 70s. You know, and he was picture-wise, he was looking into peculiar films, and you know, looking into films where I had the feeling, okay, then in the 70s there was also fantastic thriller music, you know. So I looked into that and just analyzed the functionality, how they were using thriller music, and that's where the palette of high string elements was coming from, like, you know, the driven high strings were in a lot of 70s thrillers. You had you know, moments of da da, you know, like the strings were just more like explosive events rather than lyrical, or let's say they didn't play so much. A lot of the bass lines were played by piano and low strings doubled, you know.
You just explained so much to me. I mean, you've answered questions, and it also makes me wonder. First of all, you remind me of Klute, which has an incredible score, which I haven't thought of for a while, which is that disembodied voice that just makes everything, makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But, you know, I'm thinking about the overture to Conclave, and it's, you know, first it starts with, and I guess it's, I don't know, cellos, basses, it's a pizz. You think, okay, I what's going to happen here? Then there's this kind of high strings, and then there's kind of a, you know, it's interesting you say not lyrical moments, because your last two scores that for film are absolutely, I keep thinking they're atmospheric and they're episodic, and they're episodic in a way that literally makes you jump, like. You know, it's not the composer saying, I'm going to bathe you in a feeling and a sound. It's, I'm going to, in some ways, startle you. And you've just described both the genesis of that, might be in 70s films, but also I just understood something from you, the philosophy of why the music is there, as opposed to scoring individual moments. Can you tell me more about the instrument, which I've read about, but how you found that French glass instrument? Was it you waking up in the middle of the night saying, oh, I once saw, or did you own one?
No, I was actually performing with a player, Thomas Bloch, who is a player from France. who performed with me once at a concert in the Barbican. And he was having all sorts of weird instruments. It was he had a glass harp, he had the crystal bachet, and he had the onde Martineau, which is a synthesizer kind of instrument, a little bit like the theremin. So he had some awkward instruments, and when he was setting that up, I went to him and he explained me how they are working, and I was very interested, and I said, and I think we even used in some of the improvisations. He was playing the crystal bachet, but I forgot about it. It was just like something that I recognized as something that was extraordinary. And then it disappeared for a while from my radar. And now that I was looking into these glass instruments, I was thinking about him. So I called him first and I said, do you still own that crystal bachet, and could we maybe talk about it, because I might want to invite you to my studio and we could experiment a little bit. And he said, yes, of course, I'm owning it and I would love to come. So a few days before he was able to come, he broke his foot and he couldn't come. So we were suddenly, I was a little bit like, that's a shame, and he couldn't walk. But then he recommended me other players, and most of them are in Paris. It's, I think, 2 more, and there are not many instruments in the world, so it's not easy to just find, just find someone.
You can't call studio instrument rentals in Hollywood and say, send a crystal bachet over.
Maybe they have that, but maybe then you need somebody who can play it, you know. So Marc Chouarin is the guy that then came to the studio, and
where was your studio?
In Düsseldorf, in Germany. So, which is from Paris 3.5 hours.
And do you carry? The size of the instrument is enormous. I'm thinking of those kind of glass bowls.
No, it is actually, he came with a car, and, and they just set it up in the studio with 2 people, and they set it up. It was very quickly set up on the evening, and then they stayed overnight, and then the next morning we recorded. I wrote some, some pieces for it.
Read notation, and it's actual pitches that you just play. Okay.
Yeah, 4 octaves. 4 octaves tuned and very low basses. It is really, I think even Hans Zimmer was using it in Interstellar, from what I understand. And the feeling of it is really otherworldly. I mean, when you sit in with that instrument in one room, you don't even think that this is coming out of glass rods. In the beginning, you look at it and I don't know that there's any feeling coming out of this instrument. It looks pretty cold in the first place. And then he starts playing with it, and I can just highly recommend on his website. On Marc Chouarin's website, you can find him explaining how the crystal bachet works and how it sounds, and it's a beautiful instrument.
And so with that instrument, what is the process? Have you pre-recorded and he's overdubbing these sounds? Are you just capturing his sounds and then using them, sampling them, and putting them in? What is the process for creating it? And also, to make it a more complicated question, has your director said, yes, okay, go ahead, he's heard it, or is he trusting you to deliver what you think may be appropriate? Those are
hasn't heard
2 different questions.
Yes, I know. But first of all, he hasn't heard anything before. I always like to send a palette of different ideas, with All Quiet I sent just 1 cue, which was very risky, which was the very first opening, the 3-note motive. That was my very first cue. Yes, I sent that to him.
To death.
Yes, me too. So I just had to send it out so that it's gone from my computer. But no, I actually sent that as 1 cue to him, in the risk that he might say, "Oh God, this is horror," or I don't like it at all. And that this was just it was hitting it right. The hammer right on the nail. And he called me 2 days later. The waiting was horrible, but then when he called me, he said, this is exactly what I love. please move onwards. And that meant to me, okay, now I have this 3-tone motive. Everything that I'm writing will be based on these three notes. And if I feel I need another theme, I will move on with another theme. But now I start with this. With Conclave, it was a little bit more difficult because we had to cover a lot of different moods and different intentions with the music. And also it was difficult to not overpower the dialogue and everything that is so delicate and very well played, and you don't want to at all interfere with something where you just take this note out or something like that. You want to in a way support certain moments. And so when I recorded the Crystal Bachet, I wrote motives with a Crystal Bachet sample, where I tried to figure out how could that sound, how could the theme sound with the Crystal Bachet, just to make sure when Mark is coming to the studio that I give him some notation and say, I have several themes, can we start with that? And once we record all the themes in different speeds, in different tunings, all overdubs, because you can take the melody out, you can take the chords out, you can take the bass out, but you have always 3-4 layers of that thing. Then I said to him, and at the end, why don't you just play on top of it, just whatever you like?
Wow.
And so I record also like free, because he knows the instrument so much better, and he knows how to work with it. So we have in the end, for one take, we have 6 stems that can all laid over each other. But you can also take just one and it sounds already rich. And that makes it very interesting for the cutting room, because you can put them all underneath and you mute 2 or 3 and you say, this is exactly what we need. The sound is great, but we need a thinner version. And a lot of times decisions are so subjective that if you don't have the option to form something on the fly, the idea flies in the bin.
When you go to a mix, or I don't know if you're invited to a mix, do you know how it's going to? You just mentioned the cutting room, and a lot of people don't understand that the music editor can sometimes play a enormous role in how the score evolves. Did you know the choices that were being made? Did they ask your opinion? Is it completely up to the director? It's like having the actor in the room say, I like that take better of me, and the director says, I am thankful for your opinion, but I don't need it. Do you go to a mix?
Yeah, but not to the. I go mostly when my feeling is, and that would be my preference, if I would be the dub mixer, I would always love to have time for myself. For a long time, and not having the musician in the back like, hey, can you put the bass drum a little bit higher, and like nagging around. You want to have somebody taking the mixes. I have always working mostly with a sound mixer called Daniel Cresco, and he when he delivers the mixes, they are already sitting so well because he mixes them with the dialogue. Then they get 7.1 stems. Sometimes I just I visit the mix on the first day.
Where are they mixing?
Just see them. They mixed the Conclave at Abbey Road.
In the big room, or in one of the mix rooms?
Well, it was in the big room, yes. And what I really liked was that I saw the dub mixer just putting the stems up and just leave them where they are. So no, it was not much of a, oh no, I can have to take that out. And that's always a good sign. And then when you then leave for, let's say, 10 days, 12 days, and then there is a day at the end where everybody can make notes. Mostly I come on that day when everybody is, invited to do the last round. And I'm mostly, I would say in the last couple of years, my comments were mostly, can we actually give it here and there a little bit more level? but not under the dialogue, but just in the moments where the music can be present. Can we give it the same amount of level as, let's say, the breathing?
Yeah. Oh, God. It's interesting because one of the things about your score, and more in All Quiet than in Conclave, is that the music was actually upsetting in the first time I saw All Quiet in how present it was allowed to be. That thing, do, 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 is like a heavy it's like Led Zeppelin just showed up. And I thought, wow. First of all, I've never heard a score like this. I've never had a director say, music is about to show up in a way that's going to make you sit up in your seat. And so, in some ways, I don't know if in Conclave, it had to be more subtle, and maybe in All Quiet on the Western Front, there's a lot of war footage and a lot of sound effects. But one of the things I love about your work is that the music makes a statement. It's not, that horrible sound, that horrible expression, background music. And so, I would hope they'd raise the level.
Well, I mean, it's also when you work with someone where the film, in a way, is already so well crafted. And, even sometimes I look at the film like, I don't know if it needs at all music. It's already really a wonderful play in itself. I think that gives you the advantage to look closer to certain areas where music can actually give a statement that helps the plot to nearly get stronger or even get stronger, and not like, in a way to support something that is not, where you feel like uncertain about or unclear about. A lot of times music is used in a lot of ways where somebody's maybe not so sure if the scene has enough tension, so the tension is infused. We never, Edward and me, we hardly have the moments where we say, oh, I think this scene needs a little bit something. We rather say, why don't we pre-shadow that moment that comes later with an emotion beforehand, or why can we actually keep an echo of what we saw now in acting? Why don't we keep that echo going and transporting the mood of the dialogue?
So are you spotting the film with him all the way through? Or is he allowing you to?
No, we in a way. I mean, he's editing first to make the movie, or to put the movie in a shape where he feels like this feels already like a good film. And then I receive it with, let's say, sometimes with music of myself, sometimes with little snippets from other composers but the music never tells me, please write it as we tempt it. It always tells me in a way, this is a space holder. It helped us for the cut, but take it all off and start from scratch. But the spot is quite close to where we maybe feel music is needed. And the way it is placed a lot of times gives me already a good grid of moments where I feel, okay, they put now twice a cue in a very sensitive moment. It feels like this sensitivity is a very important part of a film, because that creates, let's say, some longing for for a better life, or something like that. Or there are two moments where in Conclave where the music was already under the prayers, but the music was not kitschy. It was just like something that in a way tried to be an echo of the search of, let's say, how can I continue, how what's the next thing to do. So in a way to see that, I was right away saying, okay, I need something that is there much more like delicate, but that also maybe is connected with a religious state of mind. And then, I start working on it. send it over. And sometimes, I think with Conclave, the hardest scene was actually the one with a dead Pope getting into the ambulance and, getting, when he says close the door. That's a very long, like thriller type of music, which with all these kind of yearning cellos, and then it starts to speed up, and then at the end it stops, and we see just the plastic bag in the ambulance rattling, where the rattling is actually a kind of rhythm that does tick tick tick, and that's totally empty, which is really nice because the music disappears, and the rattling, suddenly the sound design takes over. And it's a part of the music in a way. You couldn't do it differently in a electronic music track. You would maybe use 808 that does.
That's funny. Hip hop cue right there.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of interest when I listen to you. I realize that, and it might be my own lack of information. Mm-hmm. A lot of listeners, I'm sure, are curious about where you grew up, how you came to film music. I was asked at one point, did he go to music school to learn all this? Can you share? Because there's so many composers I know about, and Volker, we've known each other for a few years, but I don't think I've ever asked you.
Well, I mean, I learned piano when I was 9. I was sitting with my mom in the church, and I listened to a Chopin concert. And I said to my mom, I want to have lessons with this man. I want to play exactly the same piece. Like he does. That was maybe my approach. And he was my teacher right away. We had no piano. We had not much money at that time. My grand aunt was then being convinced that she can give us one of her 2 pianos that she had at that time. So she gave us one. And so I started to play piano. And then, with the age of 12, I had my first rock band.
Nice.
Where? We were in the village. No, in a small village, very small village near Düsseldorf. It was the only place where what you can do at night. There was nothing. You could go outside. You met friends with 12. But I also felt the piano was much more like an instrument that I wanted to learn to play synthesizer. So we had a rehearsal space with other bands, and they were much older, so they gave us a lot of times, synthesizers from them. We could lend their PA system. I had my first show at the GI club in Frankfurt called the Batsch Cup. Which was we were presented as playing R&B. We were all like white kids, had no idea what R&B was, but we played it somehow and tried. And in the end, it was a nice experience because we had one driver that was 18, and he could drive us there and drove us back. And my parents were a little bit concerned that we were at night in a kind of club. But, I made all these experiences, and then I did my first TV series when I was 18, because friends, the parents of our guitar player were directors, and that was the only connection to film. And so we did one episode of a series. We gave them our songs that we wrote, and they put them in the radio, and in all as source. They used it as source music. And then I started to study medicine.
I mean, that, went from rock band to medicine, of course.
Yeah, I couldn't find a proper school that was in somehow, like a music school that was covering the areas that I was interested in. And my parents were always saying, get a proper job, and musician is maybe not the best idea. So I felt, okay, they have, they know about it. I have to say, from my perspective from now, they had no idea what musicianhood means. If they would have known, now that they see me having, or they saw me having success, they suddenly realized that the idea was not a bad one. But at that time they were not convinced. So I went to a medicine university, but I always somehow got into music again, starting a band again. I was signed by Sony Music. I played, it was a kind of hip hop crossover band. We opened for bands like Public Enemy and Suicidal Tendencies. I was jumping around like a madman on stage, and stage dived. And what is now in the music maybe present from that time is the physicality of music. I love actually, music that physically, in a way involves you, as like, full-on guitar riffs, drums that are like making you dance, or getting wild or jump around or whatever. Like, getting a physical experience with music is so important, because it also has a kind of ritual aspect of music that I sometimes miss when I just only hear music that is forcing me into my brain, which also is important.
It's interesting because so much of your music makes all of us think, as well as feel. So that's interesting. Yeah. Was there a moment that you went from opening for these bands and being in a rock band where you returned to that moment of film and music coming together?
Yeah, well, I was returned to myself. I was never, in all these searches, there was never something where I felt, this is me. It was just more a kind of image of, oh, I want to be a rock star. And then I went into the rock band, and I always had the feeling when I have a plan, it's materializing somehow. So when I'm thinking about something, I do everything to make that happen. And so when I did that, in the first place, when we were with the band and we were signed to Sony Music, we suddenly got dropped because we were not in the charts. So the career was over, and I was pretty deeply disappointed. But at the same time, it helped me to actually realize that it's not about writing a hit in my career. It's much more in finding a musical expression that helps me to, actually to go on stage and that I'm me. So Hauschka, my prepared piano project, was in a way the first time where I felt I'm performing. I love what I'm doing, and audiences are piling up in front of the record table.
So Hauschka was before film scoring. I've been listening to Hauschka and listening to you with Hilary Hahn, one of the great violinists on the planet, and wondering which came first. And tell us about just a little about Hauschka, and also what aspect of the piano is prepared. Is it a John Cage kind of thing? Is it?
No, it's more like, I didn't know John Cage at all when I started preparing the piano. And that's maybe sounding a little, he can say that, but because my scene, and that's very interesting, what I found out there is that musical scenes are so isolated in a way. In a way, let's say when you're in hip-hop, you know what drum machine people are using to create hip-hop, but you don't know maybe about the electronic artist that is in a way doing similar stuff than yours, but you are not anymore in that scene. So the music is not transported to you in a way. So when you cross over into other scenes, you suddenly realize, okay, there's somebody who's in a way doing exactly what I'm doing, but it sounds so different. and that makes it very interesting. In a way, also like when you go to Indian music, or to music that is like old, like music from, but that is not classical, like let's say music from Reverence in 1900, who just played amplified, or like a guitar, and were doing their rhythms with a foot. Things like that, where you just suddenly feel, oh, there was a lot of rawness and handmade. And so when I played electronic music, there was in a way the pre-Hauschka time, 2 years, 3 years. I was into techno music. I produced a couple of techno tracks for the Love Parade. I was in a way in a kind of area where experimental electronic musicians are meeting, and which goes from field recordings to techno to Steve Reich. All these pieces were somehow connected with each other because they had a repetitive element, and there were slowly changes that were they were so physically feelable.
Yeah.
And I always ask myself, why are they so feelable? And in other pieces where they do like full-on changes, you don't feel them as much. And it's actually just that you are starting from a different, touch or attachment to the music. So suddenly, once you are in it, you feel every little polyrhythmical element that is changing so much that. You feel the music in a way, it's really getting under your skin. And that was something that all these pieces had together. And I wanted to do this electronic music with an acoustic instrument. And that's why I started to prepare strings like drum kits. Or like, I prepared one string as a bass drum, one as a more with a beer bottle cap as a sitar. And so I had, each key had a different sound. And then from there on, my obviously also my how I play was changing, because some of the strings were dead. I taped them just completely dead. They were just doing like a percussive sound. So in a way, when I expected the minor third, it was like da 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 da. So in a way, suddenly there was a rhythmic element in the music. And I loved that so much that I started to record records and went on tour. And on these tours, more and more people came to me who were like directors, sound designers, artists that are, painters, sculptors, people that were creatively working. And they all said to me, mostly, they said, whenever we work, we listen to your music, and it's giving us a space to be creative. We're getting lost. We can start with something, and then those people, like directors, were asking me at some point in 2012. I would say the first time. Could you imagine to work on a bigger German cinema movie? And I said, I don't know. The music is so present. I mean, when I'm writing music with a prepared piano, it might be that you, at the end, when you hear it, you might not want to have it because it's so.
It's the first time a composer's been asked to score a film where the composer has said, I mean, this is a historic moment in the history of careers, said, I'm not sure you're going to want my music. Please continue.
Yes, and so in a way, at the end, it felt for me that the film music, in a way, gives me the opportunity to be someone else. I can actually suddenly slip in a role that is not Hauschka. I get asked to do a score just with a flute, or I can do a score with a string quartet where I'm suddenly writing for a string quartet. I can bring prepared piano every now and then on the table, but it's one part. And I really loved suddenly the opportunity, because I also saw that my Hauschka music in a way has also its limits, because in a way when you work, even though the prepared piano is endless, but my approach is the limit, not the options. It's much more the habits that are somehow restraining you and taking away your experiences. So you need other musicians and other artists to connect with, to get on different ideas.
That's
You know,
other musicians are such a great source of inspiration and information, and
absolutely.
I think that it's, I mean, we could go on to a long conversation about how all of us sit with laptops with headphones on and talk to ourselves, where the dream that we all had as musicians, certainly of a certain age, of just being in a room, hanging out with your friends, and somebody plays something on the drums, and you go, that's cool. And so it's so beautiful. It's such an interesting path you've taken. I really kind of love it in some ways, because every single moment could have been the exit ramp. You could still be in hip-hop. You could still be in electronica. You could just be the guy who plays prepared piano. Oh, I think I remember him, Hauschka. But each one has led you to the next thing. And now it's clear the future is opening up. I mean, you're doing these huge TV shows, Dune and Day of the Jackal. And it's also different because I imagine you have a relationship with a feature director, particularly Berger, that's very special and has a lot of, I would think, fluidity in how you approach the work, and TV is a very different process. Are there other features coming up that we can know about? It's always this kind of, well, I can't tell you about this yet. But anything else coming up that you're particularly excited about? Because you're about to be a 2-time Academy Award winner, and every film will say, get that guy. So you have to pick carefully. But what is coming up?
Well, Robert, in my career, I learned, and that's not only the hip-hop band, I was also teaching 10 years in a music school, and just people in a very, in a small village where career, in a way, doesn't, is not so important, or at least, the famousness of things. And so I have to say, in terms of the awards, I'm already happy being nominated, and everything else is for me something where I always feel everybody who's in that pool of nominees has deserved, to be a winner, because they have such a long career and they are so in their own field, or with that film that they've done, they created great score. At the same time, that the film is always also, in a way, the opener for each composer, because if the film doesn't work, the music can be the best music of the whole year and it will not be recognized. And so in a way, there's always a little bit of something that is random in that process. And so I'm trying not to attach myself too much to that idea. At the same time, it's for me the being now in a situation where films are, where I get asked to do a film. That's already for me something where I just feel suddenly relieved, because there were long times where I was just calling my agent and asking, hey, is there any film for me? And they said, you have to wait. We are in touch, and and then at some point you get skeptical and you ask yourself, is that really true? Do people really want me? Because maybe some points, and then you're also again on the exit road, because you feel maybe I'm running out of cash, at some point. So in a way, these kind of situations can happen anytime. You can your career can stop, you can break your hand, things can happen. Break your foot. So in a way, what I'm doing is I live in a way, first of all, every day.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that I can open my eyes, and that I have a day in front of me. And secondly, you know, the films that are coming up, there's definitely a film that I've done that I've finished already. That is the film called The Amateur. It's you know, with Rami Malek in the main role. Very great thriller that I really loved working on. That will be released, you know, in the next couple of, maybe the next half year or something. I'm not sure yet which date, but that is already finished. I've done. I'm working at the moment on Edward's next movie that is already filmed, and you know, we're editing. And last week we cracked in a way the nut.
Oh, that's a relief too.
You know, yes. Again, you know, it was in a way something where I was a little. It's a little bit like not the third record, but it's, you know, when you do successful records, then it's the next record is not easier.
That was the great myth that, oh, now that I'm a recording artist or a composer or a director, it's all golden. No, it just gets harder. It's like the air gets thinner the higher the mountain.
Exactly.
And so
exactly, and when you learn to surprise yourself by finding methods of, you know, in a way challenging you, I think then there's an opportunity of moving left and right. And when people think you're on the left, you'll move to the right, and you're just standing there with a smile on your face, and saying, "Hey, I've actually moved over there because I want to see what's up over there." And then when people try to spot you in that area, you are maybe on the other side because you want to, you know, in a way, challenge yourself, and you want to be surprised. And it's not only to surprise others, it's actually to surprise yourself, because there you can search for new aspects. You feel young, you feel fresh, you know, you're searching. And I think that's something that gives me a lot of pleasure. And that's why I'm a musician.
Well, those are some words of wisdom, sports fans, for how to stay creative. I mean, I really love that. It's zigging when they think you're going to zag. Volker, I just appreciate your time. I really am excited about what comes next. I actually was interested in knowing more about the amateur, so that's great. I'm going to continue to listen to Hauschka because you've introduced me to it. Loved Ones is something I've been playing on repeat, so I just dig that a lot. I do wonder if Spitfire has a sample of a crystal Bachet, because that sounds like a very interesting instrument. But I just appreciate your time today, and I'm really excited about what's ahead for you, because it's.
Thank you so much, Robert.
You know, the idea of just being happy with what you have, I can never hear that enough, because we're so trained to think we don't have something, instead of look at all the things we have. And just hearing you say you're just happy with what you have and what's happened, and you're looking for new solutions to be creative, words to live by. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your time today. And
thank you.
Just think a little bit as we finish of what you're going to say in your speech, because there's some people you just don't want to leave out when you're thanking everyone. So just
I will.
Remember those things. Anyhow, Volker,
I will.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure I'll see you
Robert.
again very soon.
Yes.
Adios.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was an incredibly interesting conversation for me. I could never have predicted that Volker, first of all, I didn't know he had a career in medicine. So, I mean, I'm going to try a career in medicine. Now I'm going to actually go win an Academy Award. That's pretty interesting.
Just casually.
I loved him talking about the philosophy of his film score, because I think that he is breaking new ground as a composer. Did you enjoy the conversation?
I did. My favorite part was when he shared that Chopin was his inspiration, or how he got into music, because that's kind of how I am too. And I don't know. That was so fascinating. I loved hearing him talk about his process.
That's just
It's
amazing.
fun.
I got into music listening to my brother's 45s of Motown. So it's kind of like Chopin, only it's a little different because I would sit in front of that record player in our living room and listen to "Don't Mess with Bill,"
Oh,
na 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 na, and I thought, oh man, this moves me. But
oh.
Carol, speaking of moving us, you're about to move us with a medley. I mean, I don't know how you
I
make a
will
medley
attempt to, but I can't promise
out of
that.
some of those cues because they are very, very distinctly not particularly, he said it, they're not lyrical film music. Ba, ba, ba. That's the theme.
Oh, we should sample that.
I'd like that. Anyhow, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to play. And Spitfire Presents will be back very shortly with a new episode. So please come visit us. We'll see you then. And as Volker taught me, not to say at the end of this episode, adios, but to say, auf Wiedersehen.
Bye.
Ciao.